Welcome back to another devlog, and now is the most wonderful time of the year, which means I also have a game to make, and you know who doesn't like Christmas games, fun for the whole family. Also, this devlog and some upcoming ones are going to be slightly longer and more chill because y'all seem to enjoy it according to this poll I set out. And I also just want to see how well chill videos do in comparison to the more heavily edited videos. So now you can kinda play this video in the background while you're doing some work and, you know, have a chill time. Now, some of you may recall I made a Christmas game last year called The Present, and let's just say it did quite well, racking up a few thousand plays. And by the way, The Present used to be $3 but is now completely free for the Christmas period, so be sure to play it before Christmas ends. The link will be in the description. Anyways, The Present was about a Christmas horror game about receiving anonymous presents at your doorstep, and the presents get increasingly more disturbing as you open each one of them. The point I'm trying to make is that the Christmas horror genre has a lot of potential for interesting gameplay. An interesting example of this is Puppet Combo, where basically you're Santa trying to kill everyone, but it's not really a whole lot of horror, but it's really entertaining. Also, it's kind of a tradition on this channel to make these types of games in a few days, so I'm gonna give myself about 5 days using the concepts mentioned previously. I'm also going to mark this as the official sequel to The Present, and Volume 3 of the Spirit and Horrors game collection I'm making. Now let's not waste any more time and let's get on with it. Also be sure to subscribe, thanks. Part 1. The Variables. The first day was definitely the most unproductive for a few reasons. Now the first problem came almost immediately. I wanted to make a third-person follow camera where the camera's position stays put somewhere on the ceiling or the corner, but it rotates to face the player's character. As you might have known, I've always favored a first-person camera angle, where the camera is just stuck to the player's head. Fortunately, with a little bit of trial and error and math, the camera is now able to rotate towards the player while stationary. Now of course, we can't really have a big giant red cuboid running around, so of course we need a character model. And who better to put in the Christmas game than Santa Claus himself? Using an image of Santa, I booted up Blender and I carved out a little character model in red and white paint. I used the character model from the Blender tutorial video, and I forgot the name of it, so if anyone knows where this is from, please let me know in the comments. This was by far the most complex character I've ever had to make, but to be fair, the character models I've made are not really that complex, and the previous model I made before this had probably 3 polygons. Now the hardest part of designing this model was actually his ass, and I'm not joking, this took so long to perfect. After that, I created a neat little hat that I shoved right onto Santa's head, and yeah, that looks about right. Around this time, it was getting kind of late, so I decided to get some good night's rest, because my productivity really declines at night, which might lead to some very sloppy work that I would be too lazy to change the next day. So I don't really want to risk any type of drop in quality. Part 2. The Functions. I woke up the next day, and by the next day I mean I went to China for 10 days and came back, but you know, it still counts in my head. The productivity today was kind of meh, not a whole lot done, but still good enough. Picking up where we left off from day 1, we have Santa running around T-posing, and you know, I don't think Santa really likes T-posing all the time, so we gotta add a few animations to this guy. The perfect website for this is Mixamo.com with lots of free 3D high quality animation files. And this video is not sponsored, by the way. The animation has always been kind of a problem to me because the Unity animation system kinda sucks. Unless that's just me, then anyways. I've never really been fond of the way the animation procedures are usually carried out, so I'm really glad that Mixamo.com takes care of all the dirty work. So shoutouts to them. And after some questionable character model integration into the Unity engine, Santa is now able to walk on his own 2 feet like an actual living being. Now I want to talk about the aesthetic and graphic side of the project. I wanted to go for a retro type Puppet Combo horror style aesthetic, using different tones of colors to convey the atmosphere. For this game, it's going to be set on the night before Christmas, so there will be a little bit of a darker and more gloomy tone. Using the Unity's built-in lighting system, I colored the scene to have a more bluish and grey tone. Hopefully the game will be given a little bit more of a cold atmosphere. As you might have noticed, the video is a little bit pixelated. This is because I added a retro pixelated effect, Essentially, I use the game's camera and I transfer what it sees onto an image. The image is then resized to be smaller than the original, and this new image is displayed on the screen. I actually did this at the beginning, but I kind of forgot to record it, so forgive me. After a surprisingly long day, I went back to sleep, half satisfied. Part 3. The conditions. This was definitely my most productive day as I was feeling much more energized after a good night's sleep, and I got a whole lot more done as you'll see in a bit. I started off by continuing the aesthetic using Unity's post-processing system, and I was able to add several visual effects to achieve a PS1 kind of style. Here is a list of the visual effects. Chromatic aberration, which is the colorful distortion of the edges of your screen, which makes the aesthetic look more old and outdated, which does help when you're trying to make a retro game. Vignette, or vignette, or however you want to pronounce that, is the opposite of chromatic aberration, and it's the darkening of the edges of the screen, making the atmosphere more cinematic, intense, and creepy, which is perfect for any horror game. Aliasing. You might be familiar with the term anti-aliasing in game settings and whatnot, which is the blurring of edges around polygons that can achieve a cleaner look. But the opposite of it is aliasing, which rather than blurring, sharpens the edges of polygons. Where anti-aliasing is a cleaner and more modern look, aliasing fits with a more retro style. Last but certainly not least, grain, which is pretty self-explanatory, the grainy look of the display making it feel more old and classic. Now in the puppet combo horror games, you usually interact with various objects around the environment, and they usually give a little bit of dialogue, whether that be searching through a cupboard to get items, opening doors, and reading papers. A very classic way of doing this is having a little dialogue box with some text that will gradually type its sentences. I did just that, but I also did it the boring way of having some translucent black box at the bottom and using a really good pixelated font I got off the internet to type out the text. And in this demonstration you can see it live in action, and you can go up to this green cube, press space, and voila, you got some dialogue. This wasn't particularly hard to make because of the wonderful Bracky's channel that I highly recommend to any beginner Unity users. Now you might or might not have wondered, what would happen if I just walked off the edge and went outside the boundaries? How was the camera going to keep up with the constant movement? The solution isn't have the camera moving along with the player, but rather setting up certain trigger points along the pathways, so when the player triggers one, the camera angle smoothly changes to show a different part of the map. On the topic of traveling between maps, I decided that a simple fade in and fade out transition between the scenes is a bit too boring, so using the same concept as Puppet Combo, I created a door opening animation and played it between the transition period between scenes. I have a few more minutes before going to sleep, so I spent a few minutes coding a key system where you require a specific key to open doors. So for instance, you walk through this door, it's locked, you pick up a key from this dumpster and you are able to unlock it. Simple stuff. Anyway, it's getting really late, so I gotta go sleep. Part 4. The objects. This day was also quite productive and it's probably the most interesting. I started off the day by adding a few details. Firstly, I modeled a snow terrain, which in reality is a wide plane that has a bunch of spikes in it, that is placed ever so slightly below the ground to give the illusion of snow. Still on the topic of snow, I added a very simple snow particle system, just a small touch that adds a little bit. Alright, it's day 4 and we kinda don't really have any gameplay. The reason my other game, The Present, took only one day was because the gameplay was so linear and, if you think about it, really only involved opening one door over and over again. But in this game, you aren't limited to a room and a door, and you are free to roam around. And inevitably that gameplay would be longer, and more thought and more content needed to be put in. I brainstormed a few ideas, like Santa going to different houses murdering people, to hiding from monsters, but Santa murdering people was already kinda taken, and hiding from monsters was a bit too ambitious for a Christmas game, because I had to design and animate monsters. Eventually, I decided on a much simple and practical concept of Santa delivering presents. Now, I'm gonna skip a little bit of the making of houses because I lost the recordings for this, so, you know, pretend that you're watching an epic montage. And this is the final result. I actually kinda proud of it, and it turned out a little bit better than I expected. Obviously, I'm not really going for some high quality AAA graphics, and it's not really the best thing in the world, but if it works, it works. In this period, I designed 3 levels, and the other levels you will have to play for yourself. The link in the description if you want to play for Christmas. It's completely free. I finished off the day by designing some random sound effects using the software SFXR, and it's really neat if you want some classic chiptune sound effects. Before going to sleep, I touched up on Santa's footsteps, which kinda sounds like eating a french fry, but whatever, we gotta improvise here. And that was day 4, and hopefully I can get some good night's sleep before the final day. Part 5. The game. The last day is here, and progress on day 5, similar to day 2, was kinda meh. I went searching for a couple jump scare sound effects to begin with. Okay, that was an incredibly stupid idea. The only really big things I did were making the main menu and the ending, but other than that, things should be ready. As a side note here, and I'm gonna have to make this a little more vague, the game does mean something. Anyways, I booted up the build of the game and published it on itch.io, and I probably will upload it on newgrounds.com, and I'll put it in the description if it's there. This day in particular, there's not really much to say or any details I can share that are really interesting. Postmortem. Overall, this is probably the most fun I've had making a game in quite a while, and I enjoyed it. It's just the feeling of Christmas and the Christmas atmosphere that is very motivating to work with and produce content like this. I may not be uploading in quite a while in preparation cause I got school, I need rest, these games and videos have been exhausting. You can play Santa Nightmares for free in the pinned comment or the description, or you can play the present discounted completely free just for Christmas, so be sure to check it out too. As for the Spirit Horrors collection, I'm probably going to make at least a volume 4, so keep an eye out for that. Random shoutout to ZazzyBurb2624, he's an epic gamer, and if you want a shoutout, do comment your thoughts on this video. Subscribe for more content like this, and Merry Christmas everyone!